My presentation was about the container shipping industry, the global developments, growth figures, and the oversupply that is plaguing the industry. So just trying to illustrate and also highlighting that if you want to be successful in this business, you actually need to know the details of the data. So it's not all about a global growth figure, it's also knowing where the actual growth is, because there's growth in one area of the world and not so much in another one. So it really depends on which part of the world you're trading with, how successful you're going to be in this business. Overall growth is about 1%, so that's not a lot, but you can say that intra-Asia is growing by about 4%. That's a huge big trade, so that's actually very positive. You can also see exports from South America doing well. The imports, on the other hand, are dramatic. So it's all about perspective, and the India-based trades also seem to be holding up pretty well. I think one of the lessons is to know the details. So don't just base your strategic business decisions on global growth figures. Don't just base your strategic business decisions on one single trade. If you're going to be a ship owner and ordering big ships, you know that they're only going to be used in one trade, the Asia-North Europe trade, generally speaking, and that trade happens to be one of the most poorly grown trades for the last couple of years, with one exception. So you're buying ships for a 25-year period, so I think it's important to realize that what are you going to do with your expensive assets when this trade that you bought these ships for is actually not performing? Do you have a plan B? And I think that's the lesson that many lines are learning the hard way now, is maybe bigger isn't always better. 2017 is actually very hard to predict. A couple of major events happened. I think consolidation in the short term will probably be at an end, or maybe one more transaction. That could be in the pipeline. I think the biggest event is what happened in the US, and it's going to be interesting to see what the trade policies will be of the Trump administration. Rhetoric in the elections was actually pretty protectionistic, but let's see if that's actually going to be what's happening. And if it's going to be protectionistic, that will affect obviously the US trades, but it will be interesting to see what kind of measures they would take and how they would impact other countries. If they slap tariffs on products from China, for sure China will not let that stand and pass by. So something will happen, and that is actually going to be very interesting. On the other hand, it could also be a very positive sign. If he managed to end the conflict in Syria or the standoff with Russia, trade with those countries could actually increase. So it's very uncertain what's going to happen, but from our perspective, we expect a moderate growth of between 2–2.5% for 2017. I think indeed that's you already mentioned European in the world, so you see people from different parts of the world, people from different parts of the supply chain combining, giving their views on what's going to happen. I'm a relative outsider, being in a consultancy firm, so we look at it fairly, we think, objectively. But if you're in the thick of things, you may see things differently. You may actually see things happening on the ground that are actually invisible to us, looking on a sort of a bird's eye view. So that is very interesting for people to learn what I think is going to happen. But for me, it's also to pick up what's really happening in the trade. So that's where conferences, trade shows like this are really important. Yeah, so Seabury, we are a consultancy firm with two main activities. One is strategic consulting, like any consultancy firm, but focused on the transportation industry. The other is data intelligence, or business intelligence rather. We're actually rolling out a new product that has details on all shippers in China, so the names of the actual shippers or the receivers in China. That's definitely going to be rolled out by us coming next year, and this is also one example of why it's so important to understand all the details. So it's nice to talk about China as a country, but it's already better if you talk about China as a number of provinces or cities. But it's even better if you know the actual party behind it who's actually shipping the goods and responsible for the growth, and how are they behaving, how are their supply chains looking, and that's the kind of thing that we're currently rolling out, and that's where we will be focusing on next year.